With Donald Trump, there is never a dull moment. Every day comes with a new disrupting headline. And this time has come the American president's flip flop on tariffs, a 90-day pause for all countries except China. As Trump escalates the trade war with China, what does it mean for India? This question is being asked even as Trump is being accused of market manipulation and insider trading in his own country. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. I think we've all gone pretty crazy trying to understand what Trump is up to. Every day brings a new disruption in terms of Trump's policy and what it might mean for the global trading order, if that order even remains anymore. But after his announcement of new tariffs and the fierce pushback from global markets and global leaders across the world came the pause button. Trump folded, at least for 90 days, on this tariff regime, with his administration effectively saying that those who did not retaliate would be rewarded. But Trump escalated the situation with China, and now China and the United States of America are in the midst of a big global trade war. In the meantime, the question is, what does it mean for India? The Modi government's ministers, including Piyush Goyal, who was part of the back channel talks with the Trump administration, are praising the government for handling it, quote unquote, extremely efficiently. They are arguing that these back channel talks have already been moving towards a bilateral trade agreement. But the uncertainties are many, and mostly because nobody can predict what Trump might do next. There is also the insider trading and the market manipulation tag against Donald Trump. Why? Because minutes before or moments before he made this announcement on the 90-day pause was a social media post from him basically telling people that it was a great time to buy on the markets. Amid this market manipulation row, from an Indian perspective, what does it mean for us and the world? Let me introduce a very distinguished panel of experts. Let me welcome Subhash Garg, former finance secretary to the program, well-known author, someone who called Trump's actions insanity, an insanity run on this very program. Well, the insanity seems to deepen every day. We have no idea what's coming next. Also joining us on the program, veteran diplomat, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal. What would a diplomat do in this situation? Can anybody do anything at all? Do you have to just take back and accept it, with the Trump administration basically saying that those who do not retaliate will be rewarded? Also, I want to welcome to the program Prasad Duvuri. Prasad Duvuri is an Indian entrepreneur based out of the United States of America. He was telling me that he's been literally taking classes in economics to try and make sense of what this all means for him as a businessman. And also joining me on the program now is Dr. Sanjaya Baru. Dr. Baru on this program a few days ago was saying, why isn't the Prime Minister speaking? Today, the Modi government is saying, look, how smartly we've handled it, how discreetly we've handled it. Does he agree? We'll find out in a moment from now. All right, let me get everything started by playing out Trump's announcement for anybody who may have been asleep. Trump usually does this at midnight our time, so many people kind of miss this overnight hours of Trump news, which many of us have now, insomniacs among us, keenly look out for. This is Donald Trump making his big announcement.
Jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, they were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents, they wouldn't have done it. And it had to be done. What was happening to us on trade, not only with, if you look at it, not only with China, but China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. They had to stop because it was not sustainable. Last year, China made $1 trillion off trade with the United States. That's not right. And now I've reversed it. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. It's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well. And they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out.
Now, China is vowing to fight to the finish. Let me bring in first Subhash Garg, because you call this insanity unleashed on the last time we were talking. Now that he's hit the brakes for 90 days, what's the adjective you'd use? Is this still insanity running loose, or is this Trump recovering sanity, or is it, just something that leaves you speechless?
See, Barkha, I think this is insanity continuing and playing games, which he doesn't know where it'll end.
Hmm.
Uh, that's where my see, he has announced this pause for 90 days on 75 countries. We don't know which 75 countries these are, which have been paused. White House issued no statement naming these countries and taking a pause. It's all market. It's all in the media. It's all through his social media handle.
Hmm.
The world doesn't know. Trading is not a joke. It's not a game you play like subsidy or that kind of thing. It's not that. Everything has to sort of meander through thousands of value chains, exports, imports, and that kind of thing. What he has done is, if you interpret that what he has done today is that there are 75 countries whose tariffs have been paused except for 10% increase, which is for everyone. So India, everyone has 10% additional tariff. What he has said is that the steel aluminum tariff of 25% stays. China goes to 125%. Now, China is the largest trading partner of US. China is the
Hmm.
largest exporter. China also exports through, or Chinese companies also export through many other East Asian countries. Where you take Vietnam, Taiwan, South Korea, and many others. Now, if Vietnam is paused, China is not paused, how would the goods travel? The result is, to my mind, and that's what I have from the market sources. The contracting for purchase or exports and import has virtually been suspended. So what Trump has paused is the tariff, but what business and the industry has done is to pause the trading itself. Now
Hmm.
that is where the big danger is. If doesn't take place, I was expecting that he will not continue with this tariff. That's what I said. Maximum 3 months he can do it, but he has succumbed much before. But even while succumbing, while taking back what he has said, trying to do that, he has left many more unanswered questions open, alleys, and therefore this big state of turmoil, confusion, and non-trade, non-economic performance is what we have. I think we are
Yeah.
in for a
So if I may ask you, Mr. Garg, are you saying this 90-day pause and the market soaring doesn't actually mean anything great for businesses?
absolutely market sort of rallied one day as a kind of relief rally. You had lost $10 trillion of the market caps. Now you might have recovered $1 to $2 trillion. Today it might go back again. We don't know. There is no conviction. There is no clear direction of where things are headed. And in such a situation, you may act short term,
Yeah.
trying to make some gains, like some short sellers in US have made money. There are now lots of media stories where some of the short sellers are making money. Now, in such a situation where there is a massacre all around, still some people may make
Okay.
money. It's
Okay,
not
so
real.
you're saying nothing is better, and I want to specifically get into what this might mean for us here in India. But since we're talking about the markets, before I open this up, Trump is now being accused of insider trading, manipulating the markets, basically because in a social media post, moments before his administration reveals which way the tariffs are being paused, he actually says this is a great time to buy. He's giving advice to people to buy. Why? Because you can buy on cheap, you expect the markets to rise, and then you can sell, which is why Subhash ji was making the point about short sellers making money. He is being accused of market manipulation. I want to play out a clip from a Democrat leader, Elizabeth Warren. Take a look.
Donald Trump is trashing our economy First, Donald Trump imposed across-the-board tariffs. Then, just a few hours ago, he dropped those tariffs to 10% on everyone and moved the tariffs up to 125% on China, up from 105% yesterday. Now, there's confusion, there's chaos, and right before Donald Trump declared that some of his tariffs were off again, he sent out a message to his billionaire buddies. He posted, "This is a great time to buy," in all caps. Was that market manipulation? Was it corruption in plain sight? We need an independent investigation into market manipulation because Americans need to know whether President Trump or anyone in his administration manipulated the market to benefit their donors, all while they are working for the American people.
What a mess, Ambassador Dayal. And my question to you would be, if none of the old rules of diplomacy actually apply to a president who actually says that countries who were negotiating with him were kissing his ass. This is not my language, it's his. What does a diplomat do? What does the government do? There's no rule. All rules are off the table. So if you were in the negotiating room with Trump's government, what would you be doing?
Well, Barkha, you're absolutely right. It's a dilemma. Negotiations with the Trump administration are not going to be easy. On one hand, if you recall, he said Prime Minister Modi is his great friend, while at the same time, he announced this 26% reciprocal tariffs on India. So that shows that he may say some things, but he may actually be doing things which may be hurtful. But however, having said that, I think that diplomacy is the art of the possible. And all along, I think we had noted a couple of things. Firstly, in his executive order, which he had signed last week, he had clearly said that he would give respite to nations who take significant steps to remedy non-reciprocal trade agreements. Now, India was one of the first nations to have started talks on a trade deal with the US. Secondly, we took note of whatever he was saying and trying to do, and we made it clear we were not going to impose counter tariffs on the US. And we said we would be focusing on the bilateral trade agreement as quickly as possible. In fact, we tried to win over Trump by slashing duties on the Harley Davidson bikes and on bourbon whiskey, things like that. But the point is, we made it clear we do not want an escalation of the tariff war. And I think this message went across. Now, I don't know the real reason why he has backtracked and he has given this 90-day window. There are some analysts who are saying that this is because he came under pressure from his own friends in the business community who felt that the stock market crash was going to harm America. His own administration people are saying this was just a negotiating technique. He didn't want to hurt the other nations. He really wants to go at China, which is the big offender, etc., etc. So one day doesn't really know what the real reason was, but nonetheless, we had done everything possible to minimize the damage and to send across the message that we don't want to escalate the tariff war. We want a bilateral trade agreement. In fact, we had held talks on that. So I think by and large, it was a good approach that India adopted, and I think the results should be beneficial.
So let me bring in Dr. Baru at this point, because Dr. Baru, a couple of days ago, when we were looking at Trump's tariffs, you said that, look, the prime minister needs to speak on this with the people, and you made the point that the people deserve to know what this might mean for them, how the government is thinking of preparing the economy, and so on. Today, Piyush Goyal has given a statement, and I will play it later if we have the time, basically saying that India has handled this really efficiently. Ambassador Dayal seems to say that discretion has been proven to be the better part of valor, because Trump's guys are actually saying if you don't retaliate, you will be rewarded. If you're meek with us publicly, if you behave yourself with us, we won't come after you. So the government might argue that keeping quiet and back channeling was the way to go, not as you were suggesting for the prime minister to speak to the public. Do you have a change of mind on your earlier formulation?
Barkha, first of all, Piyush is someone who is a habituated to congratulating his own behavior. I mean, he's always full of self-praise. But having said that, look, as Mr. Garg said, 75 countries have been spread, right? So what's so special about India? What is it that all this so-called reaching out, talk about bilateral trade agreement? The Brazilians criticize Trump. The Indonesians, the Singaporeans, the South Africans, everybody is in this 10% increase. Everybody is in the 75% pause, 75 country pause, right? Only China is targeted. So countries that spoke up have also are in the pause list. I don't think one should get carried away by this government's talk about how things are going well. We still don't know what this bilateral trade agreement is all about. How can I comment on an agreement whose contours we don't know? What is it they are giving? What is it we are giving? How does it affect our economy? So there's no point in talking about future. Let us look at the present. What has happened is, as I think Mr. Garg said, 10% now blanket, everybody has been slapped with the 10% tariff. Okay, that's done. But what is worrying is that you now still have a 90-day period of uncertainty and you don't know what will happen tomorrow. I don't know if you saw the congressional hearing where the US trade representative was sitting in the US Congress, where he was asked about this 90-day and he was not aware, because the news came out on a tweet from the US president and the US trade representative is not aware. So this kind of whimsical policy making, you don't expect it from the world's biggest economy, whose the consequences of these are across the world. We need some seriousness. We cannot live with uncertainty. That's the point I made last time also. That the world, okay, you tell us what exactly you have in mind and let's get done with it. But you cannot continue this uncertainty. One day say I will hit you with 26%. Next day I'll say, no, I may not hit you, then hit you with 10%. Third day, God knows, day after tomorrow, you might, if we don't buy what we are promising to buy, defense equipment from the US, what happens? The promises that were made. If you look at the joint statement of the Indian Prime Minister and the President when Modi went to the US, we have made some promises about certain purchases. Suppose you don't do that. Suppose I say, no, I still prefer Russia as my source for defense equipment. What will happen?
Yeah. So many questions, very few answers. Prasad, let's bring you in. You're actually a sort of entrepreneur trying to make sense of all of this, an Indian citizen with a green card in the US. And there are all kinds of other, by the way, disruptive actions that Trump is taking, including canceling student visas and so on, but a different discussion. You've been studying these tariffs. What does it mean for an entrepreneur like you?
So thank you, Barkha, for calling me here. The most important thing for everybody to understand is, based on what I have been through, tariff is actually a market entry toll. So when I make my products outside the US and bring it into the US, I have to pay a tariff at the port or the airport at the point of entry. The US customs will not let the products into the country unless the toll is paid. So it's a market access fee I'm paying. That's what a tariff is. It impacts my working capital. I don't know if that product will even sell in the US after it comes into the US. I might have 5-6% of waste. Every time a product comes, 5%, 6% of it will go waste. Now, my cost of that waste has gone up by 10%. So tariff is very punishing. And while India has been at the other end of this whole tariff cycle, enjoying the benefits, because the companies and the products that came into India usually came from countries that are rich and they can afford to pay that access fee and can afford to absorb those costs. For us, it's the opposite. So we are beginning to feel that now. So while everybody talks about a relief rally and all of that, the fact is this morning, the whole world, all these 75, actually it is 110 countries or something, by the way, 75 of them have approached him to kiss his backside. But the list is much longer than that. So all of them are waking up to the reality that, hey, listen, all these numbers of 24%, 27%, 34%, etc. was a ride that we were taken on, but eventually we end up with 10% more than what the 10%
Yeah,
didn't
I'm
exist last
glad you've said this because the headline is a 90-day pause, but there's still that 10% that's been added on
we-
anyway.
it's started
Yeah.
from day before yesterday. So everybody has to pay 10%. And we don't know if that number will go up. And there are 2-3 reasons for it. Number one is Trump has to find money domestically to fund his tax cuts that he announced in 2016, which are about to expire. He needs to find money to make them permanent. That is number one. Second, he's trying to reduce the trade deficit that spiked all of a sudden due to COVID and due to Biden. More than 50% of the US trade deficit that exists today happened these last two administrations. So that is the other problem. So he needs the money. So these tariffs could go up. It may not only be 10%. It could be 15%, 20%. We don't know. So as an importer, what I would do is, Jaan bachi are 10%. So I am going to make as much inventory as possible right now and get that inventory here into the US, just like Apple did on iPhones. They lifted 5 747s of iPhones in the last 7-8 days and brought it into the US.
What a crazy situation. Now, let's come to what next. Subhash Garg, some people say there's an opportunity for India. Some people say this is going to be terrible for India. Which side of the debate are you on? Can we unmute Subhash?
Fundamentals of Indian situation vis-a-vis. You have roughly $85 billion exports, roughly $40 billion of imports, $45 billion of deficit. Tariffs are different. We have average of about 15-16%. US is much less. Agriculture is about 38-39. Now, if you want to go on the negotiating table to negotiate an FTA, what do you negotiate for? What Americans are asking for, if you interpret Trump right, that eliminate this $45 billion of deficit and bring down the rates to our rates. These are the two main asks. Now, on both, India has problem. India cannot reduce the tariffs to the American levels. Agriculture goods, cars, whatever you take, there's enormous amount of domestic agenda. There is a problem with all other suppliers or our trade partners. You just can't do it. But suppose you do it still. And then how do you satisfy that remaining $45 billion of gap? Now you buy a lot of petroleum from them, defense and many other things, and end up buying costlier goods and surrender whatever surplus you had. If that is the final outcome you get, and less than that, I don't think Trump might be satisfied. Then what are you getting? You are getting a huge slap, not only slap, but you are actually surrendering whatever little advantage you had vis-a-vis US. So this government unfortunately has the habit of celebrating much before even attaining anything or achieving. So what Piyush Goyal said, he said in a different context that we are not as much of a trading partner. Our export, trading to GDP ratio is much smaller, so therefore we'll not suffer. That's like a weak, an infirm, a sick person saying that since I can't be infected further, I'm very happy. This is convoluted. I find you are in a situation where you have, by the way, I have no belief at all that the US administration has any appetite for line to line, sector by sector kind of negotiations. They will ask you these two things: reduce tariff to our level and eliminate, come back what you will buy for eliminating this 45. This is an impossible situation. You can't negotiate it.
So basically, no great options for India, and you're saying it's not a point at which we should be saying great news for us.
Absolutely.
Right?
Not a great news. It is bad news.
So before I get reactions, and Prasad, I'll come to you first because I know you have to step off a few minutes early. Piyush Goyal, he's being discussed. Let's play out his statement and then we'll come back to the panel.
भारत तो बहुत समझदारी से इस पूरे विषय को पहले से संभाल रही है। प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी और प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप ने फरवरी में ही निर्णय ले लिया था कि हम आपसी संबंध बढ़ाते हुए बायलैटरल ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट एक ऐसा करार करेंगे जो भारत और यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स के बीच व्यापार को सरल भी करेगा, 500 बिलियन तक यानी आज से 2.5 गुना बढ़ाने का काम भी करेगा। देशवासियों को नौकरी के और अधिक साधन मिलेंगे, देश की अर्थव्यवस्था को और बल मिलेगा। तो मैं समझता हूँ भारत तो वैसे भी इस रेस में आगे था और हमारी बातचीत बहुत अच्छी प्रोग्रेस करेगी।
So our talks are going very well. Prasad, quickly before I come to Ambassador Diyar and Dr. Baru, do you believe that the fact that the Prime Minister has not spoken, has served India well? And then how would you react to Sanjay Baru's point that a whole host of countries spoke and, this 10% is a flat rate applied to everybody, irrespective of whether they spoke or not?
Well, Mr. Baru's take on this whole thing is very classical. That is how, well-raised, well-behaved gentlemen will behave. That's his expectation. But in the world we are living in, we have to deal with personalities who already come with a certain style of functioning. So we have to adjust our functioning based on that. And as I had mentioned to you yesterday, which I cannot say here, before you fiddle around with the monkey, you have to be very careful as to what could happen. So if you're ready to face it, go ahead. But otherwise, it's best to do the way our Prime Minister behaved. And I think he has studied the global environment and the leaders that he's dealing with. So I think in that respect, it is good to lie low. At the end of the day, how does it matter? I can call you the queen of the world, whatever. But if I'm able to finally get out of the situation without too much damage, that's where my focus should be, right? So I think that perspective, it went well. There are a couple of things. The dilemma that US is right now grappling with is that they want to reduce the trade deficit, but at the same time want to maintain the US dollar as the global reserve currency. One of the two can happen. If you reduce the trade deficit, it means the world is not holding your dollars anymore. So you lose that reserve currency status. And if you want to keep that, then you better run large deficits. So it is a monkey balancing act, which is very difficult. And the US is faced with this dilemma. And I don't know how they'll do it. One reason why the change happened yesterday, the 90-day pause, was that the Japanese and the Chinese hold a lot of US bonds, which they dumped in the market, creating a massive crash, and the yields on the bonds spiked suddenly. And that's when the US realized that this could be a disaster, because the stock markets affect the companies, but bond yields affect the government directly. So it's a sovereign problem which they had to solve. And that's why they gave a 90-day pause.
Right. Okay, Prasad, stay as long as you can. I know you have to step off a bit early. Ambassador Dayal, let's bring you in. Subhash Garg paints a picture where he says there aren't a lot of great options. India can't do a Vietnam and say, okay, zero from our side. So what are India's options right now?
Well, the previous panelist was absolutely correct that the need of the hour for India is to prevent an escalation of this dispute. We cannot afford to take on the United States. Look, the United States is our biggest trading partner. It is the largest destination of our exports. And if we can minimize any damage to our exports in terms of the new policies which Trump is adopting, it will be in our interest. Will we be able to do so in the next 90 days? Well, it all depends. The next 90 days will be certainly a period of great uncertainty. In fact, there will be a whirlwind of behind-the-scenes negotiations, and India would also be doing that. The US has said that it will be pursuing case-by-case arrangements. And certainly, the focus is going to be on the dispute simmering between the United States and China. You know, Trump is not the sort of person who will back down. And the situation between China and the United States will worsen. The Chinese Commerce Ministry has said that they are prepared to take necessary countermeasures. So I expect that there will be some escalation of this dispute between the United States and China before they are able to bring it down. They will certainly sit down because the escalation will not work to the advantage of either
Okay.
side. But the focus will be on that aspect. There will, of course, be discussions with the other countries. In fact, Trump has perhaps realized that the policies which he was adopting are not doing good to the average American. There was an outburst against him. In all the cities of America, people came out on the streets and protested because his policies are hurting them. We will be well advised to keep on our negotiations with the United States with the intention of working out a bilateral trade agreement, because that will be the best thing that we can do in our interest. It'll protect our interests.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Baru now and then give Subhash Garg the closing word. The consensus, well, not the consensus actually, both Prasad Duvuri and Ambassador Dayal seem to say lie low. Subhash Garg feels that there are no great options here. We'd be surrendering, in terms of what the American ask is, if we agree to it, we'd be surrendering any minor advantage we have. Your take, what are India's options at this point?
I mean, I don't understand the question.
The
Look,
question is, how would you respond if you were in government?
I would talk with the Americans. Of course, that's what the government is doing. That's not the problem. The problem is, I would also tell my people what I'm talking about. What is this bilateral trade agreement? What does it mean for me? What are my, red lines? For 90 days now, there's going to be uncertainty. Till the fall, there's going to be uncertainty. So, problem, Barkha, is not that we don't know what we are doing. The problem is we are not explaining what we are doing. We're probably doing something which is good for the country. But I think there is a need for the government to communicate, not just in closed door briefings, and not just standing outside some conference like Piyush does, speaking to ANI, but a proper briefing of people who are experts, people who understand trade policy, tariff policy. What is India being asked? What is it we can do? What is it that we cannot do? Agriculture, for example, there are interests there involved there. I think some of this has to be part of a conversation, and I don't see that conversation happening. I've been talking to trade economists. Most of them are not aware of what is happening. So that is, in my judgment, and you're a journalist, I've been a journalist all my life, I've been a communications person. I think governments need to communicate policy, not simply assure us that whatever comes out of the wash is in our interests. We want to understand what your bottom line is, what are our expectations, and what are our concerns about the global trading system. The Indian government has not said a word about WTO. The multilateral system is dead. We are one of the original founding members of the World Trade Organization. We have not said anything. The Chinese have now come out and said, let us come together and defend the interests of the global South. The Chinese government has asked India to join hands in defending the interests of the global South. We have not responded to that. We are keeping quiet. So it is this silence that I worry about.
Okay, fair question there. Subhash Garg, any quick prescriptions, immediate prescriptions? You painted a grim picture, but any prescriptive measures?
I think the round one, Trump has lost very badly with stock markets, American consumers, world economy, everything he started to make America great again, but he has at this moment caused lots of problems. Now let's watch the round number two. The round number two is that in next 90 days for 75 countries, by the way, which no one knows other than him, what kind of negotiations would start. Let us say one country, one day. And what have so far people, my understanding is that no country has offered them anything to reduce the trade deficit. they have only referred to reduce the tariffs, which is fine with them, which are not actually very high all over the world as far as Americans are concerned. That's not what satisfies. So let's watch day 1, day 2, day 3 from now onward. Which country is he able to get what he started out to get?
Yeah.
And my sense is that as you go along, every day you will find Trump failing again. In this situation, where are we figuring in that, okay, we are also standing outside the door, negotiate with us? Are we negotiating? I don't think that's so. This is a tough period. I said earlier, if you can talk to the rest of the world to deal with the surpluses of both your exports and imports, which Trump has created, how to manage that in the next 3 months of this pause period is also very important. Why people are not paying attention to that is what sort of, to me,
Yeah.
appears to be causing much bigger damage.
Well, mounting questions, and again, it is a misleading headline to say that it's a 90-day pause because there's a 10% increase anyway, flatly applied. So Trump's headline management has been rather clever there. We leave it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Sanjay Baru, Ambassador Dayal, Subhash Garg, and earlier Prasad Duvuri. Pleasure. And yes, uncertain times. People would almost rather know the worst news up front than, a drip by drip, killing with 1,000 cuts. But Subhash Garg seems to believe that Trump has lost this round. Will that chasten him or will that push him in the opposite direction? I think that's the real question. Thank you very much. And to our audience, thank you. And see you soon. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.